Hey, good afternoon and welcome to Research Cafe, this time with a panel discussion on online learning, the promises and pitfalls of online learning. My name is Karen Scapinato. I will be today's moderator. This will be our last Research Cafe for this semester as we're discontinuing it for this semester. We are replacing it with networking events that we are going to do virtually as well on various topics that were brought to us from faculty. The very first one is on COVID-19 research, which will be this Friday at 9 a.m. If you would like to participate, please feel free to send me an email and I'll send you the sign up link. With that, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. We're going to start with Julie Golden-Botti.
Thank you, Karen. I'm Julie Golden-Botti. I am the Executive Director for Online and Continuing Education here at FAU. I oversee about 40 individuals who are instructional designers, media specialists, graphic artists, web designers, multimedia developers, and the like. And we have had a busy couple of semesters helping faculty make the quick switch to remote delivery. It's been a really interesting ride for us and a very rich learning opportunity for all of us. So I'm really grateful to be asked to join this all-star cast of faculty thought leaders in the e-learning space. They've all done amazing work bringing learning to life really in their virtual classrooms. So I'm happy to be part of this panel and I look forward to our hour together. I believe Dr. Marques is next in the introductions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Golden-Botti. It's a pleasure to be here in such distinguished company today. I am a professor of engineering and computer science. I have been at FAU for about 20 years, and during this period, I have created and updated a number of courses for distance learning online delivery, thanks to the great folks at the formerly known as Center for E-Learning, now the Center for Online and Continuing Education, led by Dr. Golden-Botti. I have been publishing in this space of engineering and education, particularly online initiatives from the late 1990s when virtual office hours were conducted using something called Microsoft Net Meeting that probably no one in this panel may remember what those were. So I'm dating myself, of course, but I have been generally interested in this concept of online learning, how it can achieve the educational goals of our university, and how technology can help or hinder the goals that we try to set forth. I look forward to the discussion, and I would like to give the word next to Dr. Petrie.
Like Dr. Marques, I am a professor in the College of Engineering and Computer Science. And I've taught in or published online, research online since 2012. About 10 years ago, I started teaching a computer literacy course on computer application, which completely online, which grew to over 250 students. Currently, I'm teaching Introduction to Logic Design. I traditionally taught it as a flipped course and looked at how to integrate online labs as a research topic as guinea pigs. And last year, when we started the pandemic, I went from having it as an optional exercise to having it as a required exercise of building their low-cost online lab that allowed them to do everything from home. And that course has about, varies from 150 to 220 students. In the summers, I teach in collaboration with the College of Arts and Science and Letters, a course for the Museum of Discovery and Science to high school students. And we ported the course and transitioned it into purely online. And that was an interesting experience. The course teaches augmented reality, gaming, and virtual reality to these high school interns. And finally, I'm a member of the IEEE Board of Governors and in the committees to develop standards for online labs and also security and privacy for online classroom. And I'm in a special consortium that is developing a new field in engineering that is called learning engineering, which I'll talk to you about later. And the next person, I believe, is Michelle Vaughan.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I am an associate professor in the College of Education from the Department of Curriculum, Culture, and Educational Inquiry. I've been at FAU about 8 years, or 7 or 8. Time does kind of, you lose track after a while. Before I was here, I was at Florida Virtual School, and I served as a curriculum manager for them. And they're one of the leaders in delivering online content in the K-12 space. They serve hundreds of thousands of students, and I was able to manage the development of their English language arts courses while I was there, which really kind of helped me fall in love and see the potential of online education on a massive scale. And then coming back to FAU as a full-time faculty member, we put our master's in curriculum and instruction fully online, and I coordinate that program and help to grow that program now. But since I've been back at FAU full-time, I have really kind of dug into studying my own practice and the practice of others within this space and presenting and publishing in topics from flipped classrooms to feedback models for online learning, to really digging in and studying how we provide authentic and meaningful connections with our online students in this space as well. So any part of the instructional practice, which is, as an educator, where I feel really comfortable with, that may or may not be impacted by technology kind of fusing into a traditional classroom or completely transforming into an online classroom, is something I'm really interested in. So, what happens to both the instructional practice and the curriculum as you shift into the online modality. So that's a little bit about me. I guess we're going to turn it back over to Karen and see what the attendees have to say.
Great. Thank you, everybody. The last year, almost year now, has seen a rapid increase, of course, in online learning. We had a lot pivoting, going from the face-to-face instruction to all of a sudden and very sudden, really, the online environment. I would like to start us off with a little bit retrospectively, what happened throughout the last year or so, but then also go from there and talk a little bit about, okay, now that we are here, how can we use this as an opportunity moving forward now that we're used to online learning, or more or less used to online learning, right? But one of the questions that I've always had and that always came up when I'm talking with individuals about online learning is, how do you ensure the quality of learning is the same if you're doing online as opposed to face-to-face? It is not the same. Even now we're doing this virtual panel discussion here, right? And it's still not the same as if we were in the same room, right? Even though we can see each other. So how do you ensure the quality of the learning experience is the same if you're online and don't have your bodies together, basically? Who would like to answer that first?
I can jump in, sure. I think from the College of Education, kind of being rooted there, I think the first question for us is, are we ensuring that instruction is effective at all? So, we sometimes make assumptions just because we're face-to-face that our content is being transmitted effectively, or that the students are learning because we can see them. Although we do know that starting at middle school, people can really, sleep with their eyes open in a classroom setting. So we have to kind of figure out what works for us as instructors. What are the practices that we are most comfortable with and we feel like are most effective in transmitting our content And then how do they and can they shift and change as we go online? Because it's not the same. And the things that we are used to doing, maybe face-to-face, maybe cannot be done online or should not be done online. So going all the way back, and the Center for Online and Continuing Ed is great at this, is kind of peeling it all the way back to what are the objectives for your course? So what are you trying to get across? And then let's look at how we're gonna assess that, figure out whether our students know it, and then what are the methods that we can use to get there. So I think the modality is an opportunity for us to really think about our teaching practice, which in the College of Ed we do all the time. But as I'm having the pleasure of having conversations across the university, that's one of the great opportunities that have come out of this, is that we are now all talking about teaching. So I think that's great. And if that's how we got here, then our students are only going to be better for it. But going back to the core of what I'm trying to get across, I think is the first step before figuring out whether we're executing effectively, either online or face-to-face.
But it is a little bit important to think about, what, as you mentioned, what is your goal, right? Rather than just plunging in and thinking, oh my God, I have to do online learning now, right? Take a step back and think about what is actually a goal, and that may actually then change, how you then approach your online learning may be different from how you would have done it in a face-to-face environment. Anybody else want to? Go ahead, Julie.
We work, as Michelle mentioned, we work a lot with our faculty, just trying to get them down to the piece of like, what do you want your students to know and be able to do as a result of having taken this course? And that's kind of the core of it, right? You want them to walk away with a certain amount of knowledge, a certain amount of ability. And then once we know that piece, that's where we set the objectives from. And rather than try to replicate or duplicate everything that happens in the classroom, think about, given now our virtual space, how do we get them there? What's our pathway there? And what technologies do we have? What tools do we have? What strategies do we have? And there are so many. So I think if you have the time, I think in the pandemic, we all kind of had to make a big quick switch. So there wasn't all of this intentionality, maybe that goes into some of the classes that Oge or Michelle or Maria teach. But there are, ways to kind of step back, look at your class and say, it's not going to be exactly the same. Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't, but how can it be awesome and different in this modality? And I see that Oge is nodding his head because I know he's done a lot of work with that.
Right. I just want to add one thing, because I see the Q&A panel is filling up quite quickly, and I want to give us time to answer the questions from the attendees. But I personally represent a rather unusual case where my baseline before the pandemic was to teach a significant number of courses online. In other words, every semester I had 1 or 2 courses being fully online or mostly online. So I can speak quite clearly about the difference in online teaching and learning before and after the pandemic started, with the online as a baseline. Most of my colleagues don't have that baseline. They were happily teaching their courses in other settings, and suddenly this whole thing came out. So there's a chance that many people are actually conflating the switch to online, which had to be done in a bit of a rush, but thanks to our excellent folks at the Center for Online and Continuing Education, we did beautifully, with the pandemic and everything that it entails, including the issue of mental health, which at some point I hope we can address in this panel. Thank you.
Good point, though. I know there's stuff in the chat, but good point in differentiating between remote learning and fully online learning, right? There's an intentionality that goes into making a fully online course, the way that we build them. Remote learning is what we did, to keep academic continuity going. Excellent point. And the intentionality that you speak of, Dr. Golden-Botti, is fundamentally important, because after all, most of our students, including high school students and students at all levels, have been thrown into this situation of having no other option than to continue their studies in this format. They are probably zoomed out at this point, sick and tired of this format, no matter how much we sing and dance and put animations and videos.
And the technology clearly is not the bottleneck, it's something else. We miss the personal touch. We miss many other aspects that the technology cannot replace. And these things are bubbling inside each and every one of us, instructors and students alike. That's why the mental health issues become more delicate. And the intentionality aspect that you speak of is crucial, actually. We have a big difference to address here. From the time when a student would choose to take a course fully online out of convenience to a time when they are left with no other option than to do remote learning, and we have to ensure that their learning experience is not impaired in any way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very good point. And Maria wanted to add something,
Yes.
and then I want to start with our online question.
Yes. Just briefly, FAU was created to be an experimental type of school in all these things. So we have an unusual number of experts to call from. And now that we're out of panic mode, we can start being very strategic as a university and take on the leadership to study our students and see what works and express it to others that are just beginning on their online experience. And I think we have a responsibility to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's get started with the questions. Again, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button in the bottom of your screen and type the question. I will moderate it. If we don't get through all the questions and answer all of them during our hour that we have today, we will ask our panelists to answer them offline, and we will post the answers on our website together with a recording of this panel discussion. Okay. So the first one actually is a really good question. How do you recommend dealing with student cheating? It's really discouraging for a teacher and very unfair to those who abide by the rules. If you have somebody online who is cheating in some form or fashion. This individual is talking about the respondents lockdown. Who wants to address this first?
I'll take it. I think it's the professor's responsibility to set the integrity of the course and let the students know that it's not tolerated and talk to them when they spot situations and act to the full extent of our guidelines. When I was teaching, the first time I was teaching online, for the computer applications course, I had a system that could detect students that submitted something that they just borrowed from somebody else and put their names on it. And they had a system that could track uh, um, uh, who started it, who was the original one, and who changed and submitted it. I caught 40 students in that first assignment, and all 40 were brought in. I gave them a 0 for the course. I made it very public that this happened, and the rest of the semester, I only had 8 incidences. So it is the professor's responsibility to take charge and do something when it's detected. To detect it, you need to have a lot of different strategies and platforms that help the professor catch suspicious activities.
Thank you. Oge, Michelle, do you have any? I know you're more on the teaching side. Julie, of course, if you have any thoughts.
I would say beyond the technical aspects of the lockdown browser and some of those, the softwares that are available too, depending on the size of the class, I would also highly consider, variability in assessments, not only within a certain course, but certainly semester to semester. If we as instructors are using the same assessment semester to semester, then, there are some things that we could do to make it a little bit, more difficult, for students to cheat, because at the end of the day, I think one of our roles as the instructor is to ensure that when the students leave us, they have a handle on the content. And that's much more difficult to do if it's not their work. So thinking about the different types of assessments you can use within a course cycle, some writing samples, maybe some quizzes, some project-based, some things will give us a better idea of how well the students are learning and how they're expressing what they're learning in various ways. I understand we can't give 150 students essay tests because we'll be grading forever. But there are times that we can give one essay question, a couple times throughout the semester so that incidence goes down and we get a better idea of how well they're learning.
Okay. The next question is somewhat related to that. It has to do with turning in homework or turning in assignments, which seems to be a big problem in that the teachers end up giving the students who don't turn in their assignments on time or at all extra time to make up that work, and which then goes, negatively affects those students who actually have turned in their time, because now they're not learning what they're supposed to be learning during that make-up time. Do you have any suggestions on how to ensure that students are turning in their assignments?
Oh, so I think that question might be specific to remote learning, maybe, and the pivot that we took and the kind of quick change that we had. I think turning in assignments is a challenge in face-to-face classes as it is in remote classes. The penalties that we build into the grade book, I think it would be one of them, is that you drop a certain amount of points for each day that the thing is late, and it happens, it can happen automatically in Canvas, so it doesn't become cumbersome. But from my teaching practice, I know that students are going to turn in things late regardless. I don't know, maybe other faculty have a...
What I do is I have 2 dates that I publish for assessments or labs that are due. I have under date due, I explain to them that that's when, if they want to be on track for finishing and with my teaching presentations, that they should turn it in by that time. And then I give them an available until date, which is the date by which they should have it done, or else they're going to be completely out of whack. And that seems to work. Those that want to be on track knows when they have to submit it. And I don't give the penalty for those that want the extra time. I found that the different situations that we're encountering, or the students are encountering during COVID, are so varied and so challenging that we can't just say, this is the deadline, if you miss it, that's it. So this is part of the mental health issues that Oge was talking about.
It's an extreme situation, and I think it took a lot of give on the part of a lot of the faculty members to just understand. And I think that some of them that shared with us, there was a comfort for them in the, like, I'm as stressed as you are with this. This is difficult for me and my family as well. And just sort of joining in the, like, we all get it. We're all going to do the best. And as we said in the beginning, there's something I need you to know how to do and understand at the end of this class. And I'm going to try to get you there as best I can. The structure of this might have to yield a little bit when we're in extreme situations.
Very good point. If you allow me to just add one bit, as much as I'm using the virtual background today, a colleague of mine in a recent event that I participated under the auspices of the American Society for Engineering Education shared a very valuable tip. She doesn't use a virtual background because she likes to show students that while she's teaching the class, her kindergartner is in the corner of the same room doing her work, which is a great way to show we are all in this together. This is completely not the circumstance under which this would take place. So this to me was a very nice way to communicate to the students that we are all going through these global challenges together at different pace, with different degrees of suffering or impairment or limitations, but that we as faculty members have to work diligently to ensure that the three magic words, compassion, kindness, and flexibility, are respected in the courses that we teach in these challenging times.
I like that. I like that you're starting your course or your lecture with, we are all in this together. This is kind of there's difficulties for all of us, not just on the student side. It's definitely also a lot on the teacher and vice versa. So, we are in this all together, especially, if the online learning comes all of a sudden at you during a pandemic, right? Where you have less than normal activities environment. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This one is actually related to the mental health issue that you brought up, Oge, earlier. So the remark here is that the attendee took a required module called At Risk that deals with faculty speaking to students when there is a suspected mental health issue. The question here is, how does this work for an online instruction program where you cannot have that one-on-one discussion between the student and the faculty?
I can take this question if you allow me. I was happy to participate in the FAU Mental Health Summit. I think it was a remarkably useful and meaningful and rich event. And shortly after that, I recorded a few videos for students in my classes. I put all the hotlines and key URLs in a visible place because I was positively surprised to see that FAU had created an army of capable people to help students in need. So I make the distinction clear. I'm not a trained counselor. I'm an engineer. I'm a computer scientist, but I am a human being. I want what's best for you. And since FAU has professionals in those capacities to help, here are the numbers, here are the links. And if you have any specific situation, you can discuss with me the private messages or one-on-one Zoom meetings, and I will accommodate anything you need. And accommodations have, of course, been made. I think to a degree of maybe 5 to 10% of the class size for each course, for students who really couldn't work anymore due to the burden of job losses, illnesses, and all that.
And I think to build off of what Oge is saying, I think there are ways in the virtual environment to make really meaningful connections with students, even if you are online. And I look at online teaching kind of as a beast at the start. You really are front loading a lot of your time. You're putting your time into prep before your course even opens. And then the first week or two of any course, I'm clicking on that people tab to see all my students and see who's logged in, who hasn't, who's logged in often. That's really important data that tells you right away how tuned in some of your students are. And I'm shooting out emails right away that says, hey, I see that you haven't logged in. Is everything okay? Not, you're gonna fall behind. Because the language that we use to build those relationships with students virtually when they haven't seen us and we haven't seen them, I think is really important. So like Oge was saying, being compassionate, instead of assuming that they are dropping the ball, assume something else. Assume something else is going on and see if you can be of help and of service to that student and help them get back on track. Even when they don't turn in assignments, maybe they didn't know where it went. Maybe there was an error there as well. There are a lot of other reasons we can come up with that if our goal is to get a student on track and to be successful, then it changes the way in which we approach that student and the language we use. And I think in the beginning of a course, as you're developing those relationships, the careful use of language and coming from a place of compassion is really key to when you're 9 weeks in and a student is struggling, for them to come and reach out with you instead of kind of pull covers over their heads and just say, I can't do it, which is, I think, what we want as educators.
And I will say also that the services that are available to face-to-face students, like the CAPS office, that does exist for online students. There's a hotline that you can call. You as a faculty member can make the recommendation for them. If you see someone in crisis or catch it in their language in something that they write to you. It's very apparent to me sometimes when a student is having some sort of a crisis by the way they write in their email. Instead of it being an organized email, it starts to get disorganized. The way that they might talk, if you talk to them in a Zoom conference or something like that, to me, it's been apparent in the couple of times that it's happened to me, and I've made the referrals through that. There's also a template that we have at Center for Online and Continuing Education that has built into it all of these referral services, all of the student services that are available, so that it's in the course already. If the students are looking in there, also in our template, we have a syllabus template. The information's in there too. So those are things that you can use to make sure that the students are aware of the services as well. The university's done a really great job of replicating the services that are available to face-to-face students for all of our online students. They've done a really great job of making sure that the students have everything that the face-to-face students have.
So from what I hear is really much like we said earlier, when we're moving from face-to-face to online teaching and learning, we have to kind of rethink, how we're actually approaching this and what our goal is. Much like that, we also may have to change a little bit how we're following students online rather than what we would do if it was a face-to-face meeting, when you actually have the opportunity to watch body language more than you can on a Zoom call, right? So what Michelle primarily was saying is, watch, how an email looks like. Julie mentioned that, does it get more disorganized? Do they log in? Do they fail to turn in assignments? And again, there can be a multitude of reasons for it, but checking in on them, I think is one of the first steps to finding out if somebody has other issues going on. Okay, the next question is actually close to my heart, given that we're getting frequently questions in the Division of Research. How do you teach science in an online environment, especially applied research, right, where you have to show something and you do an investigation basically, and you learn through investigation. So to read the question here, if there are any suggestions on your end for skills-based learning goals that were previously achieved using groups in person. For example, scientific investigation, skills that relied on student-student interactions and questions as they investigated, or student teaching practice that involved class or group management skills that will be required for their work. We have been, the attendee has been struggling with both of these in environmental education and science education. And they found it very difficult to replicate online. And that goes a little bit, I personally had a lot of discussions with Julie and our provost on, what can we do online as we are having research that needs to be taught, research skills that need to be taught, and some things that historically have always been applied, right? Learning by doing, so to speak. How do we move that online? Any suggestions on that?
I was thinking Michelle was going to jump in here with.
Well, first, I'm very conscious of making sure that everybody gets a chance. I teach research online. I don't teach environmental ed online. I think that's a big distinction and a big difference. But I really do think that we're here talking about, potential and pitfalls as well. I do think there are things that may not stay online. That this may be, a stopping place for them in order to keep everybody safe and to get through the pandemic. And that there are things that are better served for our students, if they can have some kind of, social interaction and a more traditional face-to-face. In the meantime, I think that it's kind of a big job for us as instructors to think, okay, I have to come up with these, super creative ways to do some of this. I think it's really important for us to talk to each other and to talk to others in the field and to reach out to people who do what we do in other places and find out what is going on. Because those conversations I've had with others in my field, across the country, across the globe. This is a perfect time to say, how are you coping with this? How are you doing it? Because, you know, like Brian Nichols may be one of our only environmental ed folks here in the College of Ed. So he needs other people to talk to in other places to figure that out. You know, when I teach research online and I don't have them in front of me and I can't, you know, literally watch their brains kind of working through the problem, I find that I really need to chunk things out into the small skills to isolate them by themselves, because if there's too much going on in one chunk, then I can't properly assess if they have the foundational piece before I move on to something else. So my course changes in that it becomes small milestone assignments and experiences so that I can check that this is gotten before we move to the end. Because one of the issues is when you get an assignment 10 weeks in and you realize, oh my gosh, somebody missed something big in week 2, week 3, week 4. And I wasn't there. I didn't see the glazed look. I wasn't able to catch that. So being able to isolate the skills and chunk them individually, I think is a good Band-Aid to get through. But I highly recommend talking and collaborating with people in your own field to see how we are all coping. And maybe there's a gem of an idea out there that we can share.
Michelle, you have taken part in the Faculty Lounge Live that we have here. And I think, you know, having that collectivist outlook on how to do these things is really so beneficial for us. So to talk about the science and science labs specifically, we're part of a consortium across the SUS, right? So all of the people who do what I do at all of the other state universities said, like, yikes, how are we going to do this? And our faculty need to know how to do this. So there was and continues to be a consortium of e-learning people who have gotten together and said, what resources do you have? What resources do I have? What ideas do you have? What ideas do you have? And it turned into an amazing community of practice that was headed by Evie Cummings over at UF. And she thought it was so beneficial that she's going to continue to do this, because we came up with so many, one, free resources that were already out there to do science lab things online, and 2, really innovative ways to tackle the very specifics, you know, the really drilled down, yeah, but I have to teach this one particular thing, and brought in all of the people at the different universities that did that. And I think, you know, keeping dialogues open like this one between faculty who teach across disciplines and in your discipline is one of the most valuable tools when you're trying to you know, figure out a new space, like in the e-learning or hybrid learning or flipped classroom or any of the things that have come up here. And the other thing that I would throw in there about that is experiential learning is a really, it's a great tool also when you can't be in the classroom with folks. There are experiences that they can have in their own environment where they are. So thinking about, you know, what could be their lab, you know, of one, if they go into an environment that is doing things that you would do together in a classroom, and how might you assess that? There's some creative thinking around it that I think comes out of being in a collaborative.
Karen, I had some slides of the research that I'm doing. I think this would be a good segue for me to show some things where we can collaborate. Okay, can you see the screen?
We can. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to be talking about the opportunities for research collaboration with the research that I'm currently doing, which is, like I mentioned before, learning engineering is a new field being formed that addresses a lot of the topics that we're talking, and even more, and also online labs. The learning engineering discipline is being developed by the largest professional engineering society, which is called the IEEE. And they formed a consortium of more than 60 organizations from industry, from academia, and government. And FAU, even though it's the wrong logo, it has been part of this. and continues to help in development. This is an interdisciplinary discipline which brings in instructional designers, brings in people from education that focus on assessment or measurement, brings in the subject matter experts, the software engineers, the data science people that can generate learning analytics, and the applied learning sciences. So it's a field that has to bring together these different experts. And the experts in applied learning sciences are those from psychology, neuroscience, data science, motivational research, educational research, anthropology, a lot of different things that are needed to address all the different areas that Oge brought up that have to do with mental health and engaging the student and producing a good result that the student feels is personalized. And there's a movement to create open learning ecosystems, much more than learning management systems. And an infrastructure is under development, but it needs lots and lots of innovation. And this is where I think that FAU can excel, because we have a lot of experts in many different areas that are pertinent to learning engineering, particularly in AI and making the education customized or personalized, and using learning analytics to better target and move the student through mastery-based and competency-based training and education. The systems need to be adaptive, and it needs to really focus on how to address the human-centered complex system. At FAU, we're working, like I said, in learning engineering and online labs in collaboration with the Organization of American States and a non-for-profit that is headquartered in FAU's College of Engineering and Computer Science, which is called LACSE. And LACSE works very closely with the Organization of American States to address the concerns of the ministers of science and technology. It also works very closely with IEEE. So this is an initiative that involves much more than just creating a platform, but creating a hemispheric structure that supports science education and lab-based education. So what we have done up to now is developed a prototype platform that is being used in my classes to access galleries of online labs, and also permit the professor to author and vary lab experiments as they need that fully integrate with online labs. Online labs can be simulations, they could be full physical labs, but that are remote. They could be mobile laboratories or a mixture of these. And currently, this is being used with my classes, and we're testing automatic grading of the objective portions of the lab. And this is critical that we incorporate this, because in the current pandemic, when you're teaching online labs, the teaching assistants or the time that you have for office hours should be dedicated to those that need help with mastering the topic or finishing their projects. It should not be taken up with grading, or the students that already have mastered the material and you just need to check mark that they have mastered it at such a level. We're also starting research to detect and mark on webcam recordings possible suspicious activities during online assessment. So we want to take the information that we're gathering through lockdown browser or monitor, and be able to guide the professor to see where the suspicious activity is, and then view that or the monitor and determine if it is it violates academic integrity. Also, we want to develop adaptive interfaces using artificial intelligence and other mechanisms that we have in technology in order to customize instruction and adapt to the students' limitations. And we're also developing learning analytics for tracking mastery of competencies. So if you're interested in that, feel free to collaborate by emailing me, and I will try to incorporate you in the research group.
Thank you, Maria. So please contact Maria if you're interested in participating in this initiative. I think this segues really nicely into a topic that I would like to cover before we run out of time here. As we mentioned, we pivoted really quickly as the pandemic started and got worse towards the online platform, and in some ways panicking and pivoting towards the online learning platform, right? But now that we have done this for almost a year and are, I would argue, a bit more comfortable on anything online than we ever were before, this may provide an opportunity moving forward. We are now having a vaccine, so we're having the expectation that maybe in half a year or so, the majority of individuals may have been vaccinated. So hopefully COVID will be a story of the past sometime in the near future. With that, where do we go from here with online learning? Will this go entirely away? Are we going to go back to our old normal where we had primarily primarily face-to-face instruction with some online and remote learning? Or are we going to use this as an opportunity to move forward in a different direction? I'd like to hear your opinion on that. Anybody want to take this?
Okay, I don't think
I'll
that
start by quoting Yogi Berra, if you allow me, when he said, "It's very hard to make predictions, especially about the future."
The future.
That is certainly true. I just asking your opinion at this point, but also, asking your opinion on what are the opportunities that this new normal that we're currently working in are providing, right? We learned so much, I think, in the last few months. Everybody has learned so much, and just in using technology, right? How can we apply this to move forward in a different direction, and that could be a hybrid? I don't have a crystal ball either, right? But there are certainly opportunities that this new environment provides that I could personally see.
I think. Oh, go ahead, Julie. No.
I was just going to say that we have had many conversations about this with our provost and others about not losing the lessons that we've learned, not, making sure that we're leveraging everything that we have been through for building resilience for our campus and future-proofing. So we should probably never have to get back to where we were in March last year, because we've learned so many different things. And a lot of what we have learned have been, sort of like the lemonade that came out of the lemons. We had, in my unit, a lot of faculty came to us, worked with our instructional designers, and all of a sudden discovered that we were there and said, "Can I use this for like all my classes? Because this is amazing," and they found new things that they didn't know were available to them. Also, with the students, they had an opportunity to use technologies and learn technologies that they now feel more comfortable in. Somebody asked a question in there about resources for people who didn't have the technology that was available for them. So we worked with OIT to procure laptops and headsets and hotspots, cameras, etc., so that we kind of were able to fill some gaps that we didn't necessarily know existed in the first place. Jason Ball at OIT had done a survey of our students about where they were, and all of the real troublesome ones were, I don't have a device to myself. I share it with 3 other people who are also trying to go to school, or I have to do a web camera test proctoring, but I don't have a camera. So we found that there were a lot of folks that really, whether you're taking online classes or not, you really need a stable laptop, you need stable internet, you know, just to do your regular schoolwork. So I think a lot of that scaling up in our technology is going to help. Even if we never have another pandemic, which I hope we don't, we have hurricanes around here that shut us down for certain times. You know, we don't know what will happen. You know, people that can't come to campus for one reason or another are able then to have resources to continue their education. So there are a lot of things that we learned, and I think that we're being very mindful of exploring everything that we did learn, exploring where it could take us next and where the opportunities are. I don't think that distance learning or remote learning ever replaces classroom learning. It's an other, not, you know, it's another way to access education. And for some people, it's the only way they'll ever access education. I think some of us assume that everybody has the opportunity to go to a classroom, but there are so many people that don't, right? There are people who have people to care for at home, ailing parents or small children, or they have disabilities, or they are the spouse of an enlisted person who get moved around from state to state and have to keep changing schools. So our online learners, the real traditional online learners, have a different story oftentimes than that of our typical, I just graduated from high school and now I'm going to college. We have a good chunk of those people that go to FAU, our non-traditional students. So I think we learned a lot about how to better serve them as well.
Excellent points, Julie. And we certainly all, as you said, learned a lot about, you know, the whole infrastructure that you need in order to do this on a regular basis. I mean, not even just the teaching, even our division here, you know, all of a sudden everybody had to step up. You had to have a computer and internet, right? And it's sometimes still not working properly. And, you know, all this technology that all of a sudden you had to be savvy on, right? So yeah, I agree with you. I think everybody really learned a lot. Michelle, you had something else to say though?
I think they're, you know, building off what Julie says, and I think there was, you know, there are trends that we could look at pre-pandemic about distance education and online learning that, you know, may continue on or get even like a boost, you know, post-pandemic. I think at the micro level, those that said, not, you know, not me, I can't do it, that's not my wheelhouse, you know, got pushed off the cliff. Like, we did it, you know, everybody now can say they did it. They can teach online, you know, and that's something that not everybody could say a year ago. You know, whether it went beautifully, whether it was stressful, whether, you know, those are all lessons that we can take, but we did it. We did it as a university. I mean, we said a year ago, you can't teach kindergarten online. They're teaching kindergarten online, you know, so these are all things that, you know, we took away that can't. So I think now it's, where do we see the opportunities? You know, what are the programs or courses that may be better served in this way? And what are the programs and courses that may be better served in a different modality? And how can we reach more? Julie's point about access is huge. There are hundreds and thousands of students out there who don't have access to some of the programs and courses that we offer. So I think looking at how we can be of service beyond in this Tri-County area is the next conversation that we can have about, you know, who we're serving and who our population is and where they exist and how we can give more access to students who might not be able to get to us. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, you know, and I think it's important to, now that we know that we did it, to have those conversations.
Excellent points. We are about out of time. I'm going to leave you with one last question. Those questions that haven't been answered yet, we're going to have you answer offline, and then we're going to post the answers on our website together with a recording of this panel. So the last question here is, are there any trends in student participation since the pandemic started that have been surprising to you?
Start with a simple one. It's anecdotal. I don't have the hard data, but we need to learn more about the real need and meaning and format for the synchronous meetings. Some students absolutely love synchronous meetings. They sense that it gives them a sense of structure, like going to class on a certain day and time. And even with the ability of watching the recording later on, they sign up every Wednesday and Friday, say, for the synchronous lecture, even when attendance is not mandatory or something. So I think there's research to be done on how to make it even more enticing and meaningful, and maybe reward students who do that, and maybe capture what exactly is perceived as advantageous by the students who make a point of not missing the synchronous online meetings.
I would say that is probably one of the biggest challenges that we were talked to about from the faculty, is how to sort of wrangle that, right? I have students online, I have a chat box going over here, I have students in front of me. And if you don't do this a lot, even if you do it a lot, it's a little bit, you know, you got to watch your chat and that kind of thing. But is the student choice worth the upskilling to do that? And to me, what we heard from the students that really want what OJ said is I need that live thing happening for me, because I need to know where I'm supposed to be at a given time. You know, it's part of my time management in some ways. But learning how to flex, I think, is going to be one of the great things that we can look at. It helps us, you know, classroom space is a challenge around here, right? So if we can start to learn how to flex a little bit with things that don't need to be in the classroom, that very well could be online, that don't need to be, you know, live in classroom, to help with the students' schedules that are sometimes conflicting. And if you can take an online class that you could watch, you know, at your own time, that helps you schedule your classes a little bit better. So I think learning more about those flex students and what the student desires are in that space, I think that's something I've heard our provost talk about too.
I think I was surprised at how fast and how many students shut down. They freeze and shut down very, very quickly, very early in the course. And it requires a reaching out that takes a lot of time and thought from the faculty and persistence. So I look forward to trying to figure out with psychological experts what is the process to bring them back and engage. Sometimes in the class, they begin a question with, Professor, how are you? And then they ask a question. When they do that in the class, I tell them an anecdote of how I'm coping. Sometimes it's not very well. And I tell them, and at the beginning, they were astounded that I didn't say, fine, thank you, and you? And I found that caused other students to share their things, their situations, maybe offline or maybe right in the live lecture capture. So I think the humanity is the part that a lot of us need guidance with. And I think moving on from here, offering the variety of courses like we have now, live, lecture, purely online, everything, the students could move fluidly as their situation permits, and giving that or developing that flexibility in the professors and our delivery will be key to maintaining our leadership and success in this area.
Excellent point. So we are out of time. I thank you very much for your participation in today's panel discussion. Again, we will post the recording of this together with the question and answers, the remaining question and answers on our website. I do see in the Q&A that there were some resources that were mentioned. Maybe we can post those on our website as well, or have a link to where to find these resources. So with that, again, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Karen, for having us.
Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you.